We talked about at the outset that there were three important components. One was the tone at the top. The other was communication. And of course, we have been talking about communication as well. But if you look at this slide, you'll see that the hub is the audit committee there. And so I'd like to go around the horn, if we will, and talk about, what each of the parties brings to and what their responsibilities are with respect to communications and making sure that there's that robust communication between and among all of the parties, because I think that's a critical point of deterring and detecting financial reporting fraud. So, Rick, we'll start with you and we'll just go across.
Well, the point of communications obviously is making sure each party knows what the other knows, and to make sure that together we're covering the waterfront. You could probably draw this chart a lot of different ways, but it really means that all the key constituencies need to have anti-fraud activities as top of mind and as the key subject matter for dialogue and interaction among the parties.
So Tracy, how does management keep internal audit, external audit, and the board
and
apprised?
really, and again, it's just the ongoing theme that we're all discussing, and that is about that positive two-way communication, that top management, mood at the middle, every level of management does understand the key critical importance of communicating to all the constituents of the financial reporting chain. And as you mentioned before, Ken, about the informal discussions, it's important to have those formalized meetings and they're documented, accordingly, but also those informal meetings, and just to kind of get the tone of how things are going is a very big telltale sign about, is this really happening in a positive and communicative way?
So Karl, how frequent is the communication at MetLife between the internal audit and the audit committee? And do you have a seat at the table?
I think I do have a seat at the table for sure. And really with probably the board overall. We meet formally probably 6 to 9 times a year. And I meet with my audit committee chair informally over the phone at least twice a month. And we constantly email and we're constantly in contact. We work together to set the agendas. We're talking about financial statement fraud here, really, right, as opposed to operational. And there are operational fraud reports that go to the audit committee and the governance structure. But from a financial reporting perspective, our audit committee chairman kind of first started off by saying, well, they're all laid out in the 10K for us, right? Because there are significant accounting estimates that have to be disclosed. So why don't we look at each of those significant accounting estimates in the audit committee meetings, and give an understanding of everything that's going around them and actually where our decisions are being made. So if you kind of are in the black and the white and the gray, where are we? Are we black, are we white? And where are we in the gray? And are we being consistent, right, with how we look toward what is in that gray area? I mean, I could highlight some of the areas that we've covered recently, like looking at legal reserves, like looking at thematic areas around AML or cybersecurity, or how we account for our insurance liabilities.
I think that's important to know what specific acute things you're looking at. So Ken, I'm going to turn to you and ask you a specific question. I want to get your general sense, but we keep hearing how important it is that there be open communication with the audit committee, with the board of directors. But how do you give people the comfort and the assurance, and what are the mechanisms that board members can use to let internal audit, let management know, we've got an open door, we want to hear from you?
Well, a little of this is going to be tough love, so forgive me, membership of the NACD, when I respond to this. But there can't really be communications. I mean, think about your home life. You really can't have communications unless you have trust and support. If the person doesn't trust you, you're not really going to have a communication. You're going to have a monologue. And you might think it's a communication, but in reality, it's a monologue. So the first question is, how does one build up trust? Well, one builds up trust, especially when the price of poker is high. And in these matters, the price of poker is high, right? You build it up over a long period of time. You don't do things which, frankly, destroy trust. Let me give you an example of that. The chief audit executive comes in and says something about, I don't think I have adequate assets to take a look at cybersecurity. That would never happen, I recognize that. But let's suppose that did happen. If you want to destroy trust, if I'm the chair of the audit committee, first thing I do is I go to the CEO's office and I say, well, that guy's whining again about his resources. Well, what's the chances you're ever going to come to me and tell me you've got that issue? So trust in everything you do in every kind of communication and candor. Second thing, you need to set an expectation. If you haven't set the expectation of what a good communication is, it's really going to be hard to have one. Now, I'm sure we've all sat in meetings, I certainly have, when I would walk in and I would say to a board, what's your expectation? You know, you get deer in the headlight. You need to help the board figure out, and the management figure out, what is the expectation. Because the better it's understood, the higher the likelihood you're going to achieve it. Otherwise, you might achieve it and not even know you're achieving it. And third, and this may sound kind of silly, but I don't think it is, you have to speak in a common language. You need to understand that sometimes board members are going to say something that the management team really does not understand what that means, and vice versa. So I think you need to have trust and support. You need to have expectation in order to have sufficient candor, and you need a vocabulary to support it, Cindy.
I like that. I like that common language, because that's what communication is about. Before we move on to talk about skepticism, which is very important, I want to ask both Karl and Rick your perspectives on any challenges that you've seen between internal audit and external audit. You know, the relationship between the two, and how you foster any tips, leading practices for fostering that robust discussion between internal and external audit. Because it seems to me that together it's much stronger than each individual piece. So.
Yes, right. I certainly agree that together, one and one makes more than two. We coordinate very closely with our external auditors. We plan together. We determine where we are going to look at similar things. And then, we try to leverage each other's skills and talents where possible, where we can. So I think there's no reason to have an adversarial relationship. It's actually a relationship that can be very well fostered and managed. And that's what we try to do, because I think we both have slightly different views of what we're trying to accomplish. Internal audit, yes, does look at financial risk, but we look at a much broader range of risk, and we certainly don't have the skills and talent that the external audit teams have in terms of up-to-date financial accounting and reporting capabilities. So together we can really cover risk really well and bring a common message actually back to senior management and the board.
Okay, great. And Rick, your perspectives?
Karl said it well. We have somewhat different missions, but we have so much overlap. And I've been sitting here trying to think of the last time I heard of an adversarial relationship within one of our clients in the internal audit group and our engagement teams, and it seems to be very collaborative. I think the professions, organizationally, the professionals are very much aligned and work very well together.
And Cindy, if I can just mention, just even from the management side of financial reporting and my background in finance transformation initiatives to keep the integrity of financial reporting and best practices and internal controls, I understand my role of my internal audit function. However, we have also partnered with IA with regard to project management and making sure that as we are changing and shifting systems, I know as Ken mentioned earlier about the upcoming regulations and accounting changes, very critically important that those are aligned as well. So I've actually had, there is that line, obviously, between management and internal audit, but a very cohesive relationship in supporting those initiatives for the organization. And then, ending up in the integrity and financial reporting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, and probably should have added actually, that the controller, chief accounting officer is every bit is involved in those areas as external audit and internal audit. And what's interesting when you actually start working together and looking at things, a big component of efficiency and being able to get things is actually getting the right information out of the systems early on, right, as opposed to going back after it later. So it's actually people working together, coordinating on what's actually needed, in terms of providing
and also
information.
the less touch points within the process, which I know you folks at internal audit truly appreciate.
Yes.